You're welcome to take a seat, and also at this time, kids, both preschool and elementary, are welcome to be released for Kids Church. I want to quickly encourage you guys to take advantage of the YouVersion Bible app. It is an incredible tool, completely free, that you're able to use to be able to take notes and whatnot during our conversation today, just like every week. And so the instructions for how to do that are right here at my feet. But it's so great for us to be a church and just to rally together to worship our amazing God. You see, friends, for quite a long time, actually longer than any of us have been alive, longer than this town has actually even been in existence itself, there's something very specific that Jesus talks about over and over again throughout the Gospels that has been existing and being stored away in the human heart that has honestly been extremely poisonous and toxic to our walk with Jesus. You see, there's something that especially the church is allowed to kind of creep into their minds and even our own hearts. I don't even want to talk about it as if it's someone over there, but just being very real and honest, someone right here in this room with all of us. There's something that we've allowed to make its way, to kind of slither on past our guard into our hearts that we maybe don't even recognize that has been really robbing us for so long of what God is calling us to. And not just us, but so many people before us. Like I said, before this church has ever been founded, before this building was built, or even this town was established, within the human heart, there's been something that has been robbing us for so long. And it's had so many names over the years. Jesus called it one thing, and even 100 years ago, if we were to rewind the history books, we'd see that this condition was called, this belief system was called fundamentalism. And now, even within the last couple of decades, it's been given a brand new title called legalism. And maybe you've heard of this term. And maybe you're familiar with a little bit of the belief that's behind it, but understand that it is sneaky, and realize that at the very core of what it is, it's this belief that exists inside of us that if we want to create this image of ourselves as really good Christians or really great religious people, that we need to make sure we're checking off this list of following all these rules. And what happens is that we get so cemented into that roadway that we cannot even go into this other avenues that God's calling us to. You see, what happens is we walk along this sidewalk that is this cookie cutter type of life, and we measure up ourselves against it constantly because we've heard from other people or from movies or even as a child that, oh, you better not be drinking. No, you better not be smoking or cussing or going to the club. You better be going to church, and all throughout the week, all these things. You better be doing all these right things. How dare you wear any bit of jewelry, or how dare you wear pants, or even show a little bit of skin? Oh my goodness. You've heard these things. And lucky for you if you have. But what's happened for so long, and listen, Jesus ran up against this self-righteousness, but what happens with this belief is that when we anchor ourselves to it, we become so stuck in following all these rules, and what happens is it's leaning all the way towards it on one side, and perhaps, like I said, maybe you grew up in a family where your grandparent or even your parents were constantly grinding this stuff on you. And what tends to happen, maybe this is a part of your story, but what tends to happen to a lot of people is they swing to the other side, because there's a completely opposite side of the spectrum that is all about freedom. And we love freedom. And we just got to celebrate the freedom of our country a couple weeks ago, but understand that what happens so often is that when people get so bogged down in all of that stuff and that junk that just makes you feel guilty all the time, right? We tend to swing to the other side. And what happens is we try to say, I just can ignore all that stuff. We don't necessarily stop believing in God. We don't necessarily walk away from our faith, but we just ignore all those things. We say, I'm going to do what I want to do. I'm going to do what makes me happy. I'm going to go over here. I'm going to do my thing. I'll check into church every now and then, but I'm not really going to go to any of that stuff that my parents or my grandparents or people in my family tried to hold me back from I want to be free and live this way. But what we've been experiencing as people is that in our journey with Christ, neither sides are what we're hoping for. They're not really caring for our soul the way that we want to. We hear, if you follow all these rules, if you do all these good things, if you be a great person, if you create this image of yourself, then you'll be happy, then you'll feel full and fulfilled on the inside. But we don't. So we swing to the other side, right? So we have fun. We go do what we want, right? We don't care what the people above us have to say. We go and have fun. We do what we want. And so we go over here, and whatever that scene looks like for our life, we explore. We do different things that we've never done before, that we've been wanting to for so long in our heart. So we swing over this side, and we find that it just like the other side is not as fulfilling as we hoped for. It too doesn't care for our heart and our soul the way that we expected it to. And so, friends, for so long, possibly in your own journey, but humanity itself in its journey to be like God, to know God, has been swinging back and forth on this pendulum. And the reality is that neither side are what God is inviting us to. It's not working. And we're realizing that. Even if we feel like we've swung over here, we're maybe swinging back. We think, I need to get back into church. You start doing the good thing, and so we start going back into church. We're swinging, and yet we still feel exhausted and pulled down and tired, right? Like God isn't doing anything in here. Although we think we're doing what we should be. See, friends, neither side is what God is inviting us to. And I don't even want to call it a place in the middle, because it's as if we're trying to take the best of both worlds, but it's a completely different realm than what these two are playing with. That God is inviting us to live, to really know who He is, and to walk through life with Him. You see, we've been in this journey in this series through called Leaping After More, and we get to talk about the Beatitudes in Matthew chapter 5, and we've actually been in this adventure for the entire summer. And it started with Chasing After More in June, and through July we've been in this series called Leaping After More. And then here, actually next week, we'll start up our next leg of the race called Made for More, and it's all been about more. We've been grinding through all these Beatitudes, these single sentence kind of principles of truth and faith that really pack a punch, that really take us into deeper waters in our journey with Christ. And this next beatitude in our adventure is rich. It's one of the shortest, but it is definitely the heaviest. It's comprehensive as it kind of gathers all those that are couched around it and pulls it together. Both the ones that came before it that we've already talked about and the ones that come after it that we have yet to discover. You see in Matthew chapter 5, verse 8, as Jesus is there teaching on the side of a mountain with hundreds and hundreds of people in front of him, he goes through this list of Beatitudes, and he shares this in Matthew 5:8. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Wow. Incredible beatitude. You see, these beatitudes are these amazing blessings that God is eager to bestow on us, and it's not just some generic kind of blessing. And I really want us to wrap our minds around that, because you've been noticing through our series every single week that every sentence, every beatitude starts with the word blessing, right? So we were like, oh, I want to be blessed, right? I want to have God's favor. I want to have His love. I want to have His goodness in my life. I want to be blessed, right? We chase after that kind of life. And so we see that word at the beginning, but what's incredible is it's not just some generic umbrella kind of blessing and promise that God is inviting us to, but at the second step, in the second half of every beatitude, we see that there's a rich and meaningful promise, very specific. And this one says that we will see God. You see, last week, if you can recall, we talked about the beatitude where Jesus says, blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. What an incredible beatitude, an incredible blessing and promise from God. The week prior, we talked about how Jesus said, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Another incredible promise, but lean into this one, because Jesus says that will see God. And understand it's not with some pair of binoculars from a distance, waving, hey, how you doing? But it's knowing Him up close and personal. You see, a couple summers ago, Aaron and I had the chance to travel out to South Dakota. Sioux Falls, South Dakota. Has anyone ever been out to South Dakota? No? Yes? Okay, awesome. One person. But anyway, what's amazing out in that part of the country is they have these incredible animals called the American bison. All right, and if you've ever seen a buffalo, we call them buffalo, but actually their real name is the American bison because they're actually a completely different type of animal than what exists in other parts of the world. But anyway, we just call them buffalo. But we have buffalo out in that part of the country, and Erin has never seen one before in her life. I've been all out west, and so I've seen buffalo everywhere. And so when we were out in South Dakota, we made it our mission to go and hunt around for some buffalo. Now, we didn't actually hunt for buffalo, okay, hear me, but hunt around to go see, because Erin wanted to see some buffalo. So there we are in our rent-a-car, and we're driving all around the countryside, right? We left the city, and we are in the middle of nowhere, driving around, and we finally are driving the road, and we see this buffalo out in the distance, and we pull over, and Erin just gets out of the car, and just her eyes are so big, and she just marvels at these incredible animals. I mean, they're beautiful. I encourage you one time in your life to travel out west to see them. They're beautiful. There's so many other amazing things to see in that part of our country, but just that one animal itself is incredible, and Erin just marvels at them as she sees them. They're way off in the, they're just this big, way off in the distance. She's like, oh my goodness, there they are. She gets so crazy excited. She sees them kind of run through the plains, and she just gets all this excitement built up inside of her. And I just think, I've been all over out west, and I've seen them up close, really close, where I've been able to almost reach out my hand and pet one. Now, there was a fence in between us, just to let you know, I'm not that crazy. Okay, it's buffalo we're talking about, y'all. But I'm so close to hear them breathing, to see the details on their fur, and it's just incredible. And they stink. But anyway, and I just said, Erin, this is amazing, but you don't realize what you're missing, because when they're up close and personal, it's a completely different experience. See, this promise is not seeing God off in a distance, which is exciting. No, it's we really get to know God right here in front of us. I mean, right in front of us. We know Him, hear His voice, hear Him talk to us and lead us and give us strength, and we feel so beaten down and exhausted. Really feel that great sensation of hope when we are running out. Seeing God not way out there, but right here with us, where we feel His comfort when we feel so alone. We feel His leadership when we're lost. Really knowing God when the holes inside of us that have been aching for more for so long are filled with His peace and His purpose for our life. Understand God in this very promise is letting us know that we're able to know Him so close as a friend right in our life. Isn't that an incredible promise? But Jesus shares at the very beginning that those who have a pure heart, they can see God and live with Him that way. And friends, for so long we've been getting it wrong what it means to have a pure heart, because we've been swinging from this side, swinging to this side, swinging to this side. That having a pure heart is doing all the right things, being a good person, being a good Christian, reading your Bible, having your 10-minute devotion every morning, make sure you're reading your Beth more, make sure you're going to church on Sunday, make sure you're praying before you eat dinner, all of those things. We have this idea in our mind that that's what it means to have a pure heart, but it doesn't. And even get to say, oh, God loves us no matter what we do. When we swing to the other side, say, oh, we're free to do what we want. We can live how we want, check in now and then and just pray a prayer. God forgives us of our sin. We don't really have to live in any kind of commitment or devotion to Him. We just kind of get to go through life, do our own thing, and to check in every now and then. That's must be what it means to have a pure heart, just to have fun and say, I love Jesus. Yet we're not really seeing God in that either. Friends, there's a completely different world of what Jesus is inviting us to live in. And it's all in this series of leaping after more. Because for so long we've been standing on one side of the chasm, believing, convinced that this is what it looks like to follow God. But there's something, this reality of having a pure heart that is worlds different than what we've been living in already, that we've got to leap across this chasm to truly get to see God, to have Him close in our life, and to really, really know the creator of the world, y'all. Oh, you've seen the Francis Marion Forest, the trees, all the animals, everything? Yeah, he made that. This incredible planet that we live on, the solar system that surrounds us, yeah, the one who made all that stuff. The one who dwells in unapproachable light. Realize that in the scriptures, God is described as the one who dwells in unapproachable light, the one who is beyond us, where God shows us in the Old Testament that even if we get just a hair close into His presence, that we are killed because He is so perfect. That is the one that we get to know because we have a pure heart. Friends, in Matthew 9, Jesus has this moment where these disciples and other people are gathered around Him, and they're asking Him these questions, and this question kind of comes up. If you read the context, it's kind of a little bit funny, and I'm a huge fan of like comedy movies and different like sitcoms and stuff like that, so I always like kind of paint a little bit of humor into moments. But if you read it in the whole context, what's happening, it's a little funny. Is Jesus is talking about all these different topics, and then somebody just kind of like raises their hand out of the blue and asks a question. It's kind of like, kind of think of in class, right? The teacher's teaching a lecture, right? And then somebody just like sticks up a hand and they ask kind of a silly question, like, "Are you serious? Come on, right now. Try to teach something right now. Come on. Pay attention." But this moment happens in Matthew 9:14-17, and I'd love for us to read it together. Because what Jesus says draws us into the reality of what it means to have a pure heart. I don't want us to miss it. So Matthew 9, chapter 14, it's going to be here on this tiny TV right here, but I encourage you, we have Bibles on the seats. Pick it up. It's going to be on the YouVersion Bible app on your phone. But Matthew 9, chapter 9, verses 14-17. Then John's disciples came and asked him being Jesus, "How is it that we and the Pharisees fast often, but your disciples don't fast?" Jesus answered, "How can the guests of the bridegroom mourn while he is with them? The time will come when the bridegroom will be taken from them, and then they will fast." And then Jesus says this, listen, "No one sews a patch of unshrunk cloth on an old garment, for the patch will pull away from the garment, making the tear worse. Neither do people pour new wine into old wineskins. If they do, the skins will burst, the wine will run out, and the wineskins will be ruined. No, instead, pour the new wine into new wineskins, so that both are preserved." Friends, in this moment, Jesus has this kind of response to this question. I want to kind of split it in two because I don't want us to miss what happens in the front half, but I really don't want us to miss what happens later on. You see, he gets asked this question about fasting, and the reason why it's so important for us to grab a hold of this moment and kind of really lean in, because he's asked this question about fasting, and he kind of just says, you know what? It's not really as significant right now to be fasting. It's this religious discipline, this spiritual discipline that people at that time in the world had really anchored themselves to. And they really, we talk about the pendulum swing on this side. We think of, if I don't curse, don't drink, don't have any tattoos. We make that list of listen. Fasting is the top of the list for them at this time in the world. Like, if you want to be right with God, you've got to fast. It was such a serious discipline they did at that time in the world thousands of years ago, and it meant everything. God gave them that to really kind of step forward in their journey with Him, this discipline of fasting, to kind of deny with yourself and really lean on God for strength and for nourishment, for guidance and wisdom and help. But what had happened is that they took this discipline and they distorted and twisted it all around, and they made it about exalting themselves above other people. So what would happen is that they'd walk around and they'd brag. And you could see it on people's bodies that they were fasting. They would dress a certain way, they'd look a certain way, and people would know, they'd walk by, oh, wow, he's fasting. They'd brag, oh, I've been doing it for a couple days. Listen, I love food. I cannot last long, okay? But I've been doing it for weeks, or I've been doing it for this long. And they brag. And it became more about creating an image than it became about building a relationship. Which will happen. Which happens all that's legalism 101 right here, y'all. It becomes all about just going to church. It becomes all about just trying to be good people, be nice. It becomes all about just trying to tithe and try to be nice. Not really be a bad person. Quit all these behaviors. That way I'll feel good about myself. In the same way, friends, listen. They've taken this discipline of fasting and made it all about trying to be good enough and trying to make themselves feel good. Follow? And Jesus hears this question and he says, you know what? It's not really that important right now. I mean, he doesn't really discard it completely because he says, you know what, once the bridegroom's gone, then you can go back to fasting. But he just says right now, it's not really what you should be chasing after. We're going to be leaning in even more because then he goes in to talk about this metaphor with a garment being sewn onto, or a patch being sewn onto a garment, and an old used wineskin being used for new wine. Understand, I mean, listen, Jesus is bringing out this metaphor of how you would never take an old garment or a broken down wineskin. Understand that wineskin is kind of like this jug that was made of leather that would hold wine, of course, right? And so they'd use it, and sometimes it'd rip, and they'd have to fix it, all those things, and people would just say, you don't try to patch it, you don't try to reuse it, you just kind of throw it away and get a new one. And it's obvious when Jesus is bringing that up, people, they get that. I mean, just like for a lot of us, I mean, my grandma, listen, she loved to sew. Anybody have a grandma who loved to sew, or a grandparent, right? And listen, if you had a pair of jeans, if you went and stayed at grandma's and you brought a pair of jeans out of a hole, you better believe by the time you left, there was a patch on that hole, right? That was my grandma, right? She made all the quilts. She hand-sewed everything. That was my grandma growing up. I mean, I tell you what, Bed Bath & Beyond has nothing on my grandma's quilt, all right? I tell you that right now. Who has a grandparent like that who just sewed all the time? That's right. I know I'm not the only one, right? Nothing beats grandma's quilt. But Jesus is asking us to lean in to recognize that unlike grandma's quilt, you would never try to sew a patch onto this wineskin. And they're like, yeah, I get it. But Jesus is using this metaphor to help us to recognize something that's so important about how we have a pure heart. Because in this metaphor, the wineskin represents our heart. And the wine that's poured into it, the water, the liquid that's poured into it, represents this new union with God that Jesus invites us to. And what God is trying to help us open our eyes and to see and understand is that in one way we can't be bringing ourselves all dirty, beat up, and just thinking that we're doing these good things, we're following these rules, we're now good. We're now sewing all these patches onto our life. We've fixed ourselves that we think that we can be filled up. Understand that this old wineskin that people in that time in the world, they would never try to sew patches onto. We've been doing this over and over again in our walk with God, where we bring ourselves to Him, all beat up and broken, and we say, "Here, God, here's my heart," and yet we don't really give it to Him fully. We just think that we can try to sew some patches onto it because we think we can just start kind of changing some of our behaviors. We can start changing how we live, right? And that will put us in a better place. And so we'll kind of patch up a little bit of this heart that's within us, and we think that then we'll be ready to receive what God has, and yet we still have all the cracks and everything, and it falls out of us. I mean, Jesus himself doesn't even try to patch our heart. He instead says, let me give you a new one. Understand the idea of this having a pure heart is a heart that's not mixed or tainted by anything, but truly belongs to one master. A heart that doesn't belong to us and a little bit of God. A heart that doesn't have us trying to do our thing and fix it ourselves. A heart that isn't completely in our hands, but a heart that is completely being handed over to God, that is solely His. That even Jesus himself doesn't say, I'm going to patch your heart. He says, let me give you a new one because I have something to offer you that even if you tried to fix what you had before, wouldn't be good enough. So it's not about us trying to follow these rules and us trying to live this way, and it's also at the same time not thinking that we have the excuse of having all the freedom in the world. No. This idea of having a pure heart is having a heart that is out of this realm and completely different, where we truly have given every bit of ourselves to Jesus. Like begin to recognize this within our heart. Does our complete and total heart belong to God? Or in some ways, do we have our hands on it and we're trying to patch all of these things, and we anchor our identity and we think, I'm not that bad of a person. I pray pretty often, or I'm not that bad because I know a little bit about the Bible, or I'm not that bad because I go to church pretty often, or whatever. Have been so busy trying to anchor our identity and making ourselves feel good to these patches that we've been throwing onto our heart, or have we taken the leap across and said, Jesus, you can have every bit of me, and recognize, hear me, friends, hear me, this is so important. Listen, we're able to go right back over the chasm, because what happens in our journey of faith is that sometimes we bring our heart desperately to God, saying, God, I need you. So we give it all to him. But what happens is that we end up taking it back when things get all fine and dandy back together in life. When we feel like the urgency is gone, we say, all right, God, I got it now. Understand that the true test to having a heart that is fully devoted to God is our obedience to God. Not the rightfulness of our actions, how good of people we are, but what is our obedience to God. And it's so important that we allow this to speak to us, because we can be lost forever thinking, this is how I get filled. I quit doing all these habits, quit saying all those bad words. I stop doing all those things. I quit. I just got to try not to sin. That's how I get a pure heart, and that's a lie. Because what you're experiencing is that is truly not what's going to fill us. It's not how we're going to see God. And what will happen at some point in your life is you're going to swing to the other side, if you haven't already. God doesn't want us to be playing this game. He wants us to play a new one where we truly just hand ourselves completely over to him. Understand that there are three ways that we as human beings tend to be obedient people. We have obedience out of fear. We have obedience out of self-interest. And understand that those two are very similar, but they're a little bit different. Where obedience out of fear is where we're so afraid of the authority giving us a negative consequence when we disobey a rule. Understand that, listen, y'all, your pastor has this condition where I have a lead foot and I speed. It's terrible. I could be early and I'm still going to speed. It is not good, right? But I don't follow the speed limit because, I think it's a great thing. No, I follow the speed limit because I'm afraid to get a ticket. I think that's the kind of the truth for a lot of us. You see, listen to our boss because we're afraid of getting fired or getting a negative consequence. Understand that this obedience out of fear is one way that we tend to obey God, and it's not what he's inviting us to. We're afraid of him judging us. We're afraid of him condemning us. And we're afraid of if we mess up, he's going to strike us down. That's not who God is. And the second way is obedience out of self-interest, where we tend to follow God, or we tend to listen to rules, and we tend to do what's asked of us because we see that it benefits us. We have certain people in our life that we pursue, we create a friendship with because we see that it benefits us. We work hard because we want that promotion, but if somebody gets it instead of us, then I don't care anymore. I'm going to stop working hard. You know what happens a lot in our journey with Jesus? Is that we obey God because we just have a self-interest in mind. We think of what's best for us. And what happens, listen, this is so true, is that we get so angry with God when things don't go our way. When we pray and pray and pray, and he doesn't, and we've been treating God like some kind of formula. We've been treating him like a gumball machine. We pull a quarter out of our pocket, put it in, spin the knob, and a gumball falls into our hand. Listen, God is not X, Y, and Z. And sometimes we believe because we've been checking off this list, we've been doing good, that we feel like where's my gumball? But that's not how God works. And I meet people who've been following God for years, and they have a childlike faith in that way. We need to grow up and realize that that's not how God wants us to follow and take steps forward in our journey with Him. You see the third type of obedience that Jesus so badly wants us to walk in so we may have a pure heart is obedience from love. It's often what we see in our relationships with our closest friends and also with our spouse, because we do things for each other, because we love them, we adore them, and we care so much about them, so we do things. We think of their interests, we think of how we can serve them and how we can care for them. In the same way, God is inviting us to say yes to following Him out of love. And God can smell counterfeit so quickly. He can smell fake love. He is not fooled. And hear me, friends, listen. If our heart is not completely handed over and surrendered to Him, not fully devoted, then it's so easy for us to fall into the trap of just walking down this path of obedience because we're afraid of God or because we want His promises, but we don't really want Him. Self-interest. And we tend to just follow Him and say yes because we want all these blessings. God is inviting us to have a pure heart when we say yes because we love Him. And hear me, I understand. You see, in your journey with Jesus, as you're following Him, He's going to talk to your heart. And maybe this has already been happening in your life. Maybe the last couple of months, you've been kind of reconnecting with God, and things have been amazing. Fireworks have been going off. Pew, pew, woo! It's been amazing. But what happens is that God brings us into a moment, and He speaks to our heart and our soul, and He says, listen, I love you. But I don't want you to walk this way. You see, there's this patch on your heart that you've been holding on to for so long, and I don't want you to carry it. He's going to say, listen, can we try to peel this off so that I can give you a new one? And sometimes it's hard to say yes. There are relationships we've been in, habits we've picked up in life that make us feel happy. Or these desires and ambitions within us that we've known for so long, and we just feel like if we get those satisfied, then we'll be okay. If we just get that husband, get that boyfriend, get that perfect right person, if my spouse just stops acting up and is a great person, if my teenager just stops rebelling, then finally I'll feel good. But we don't realize that God is inviting us to say yes because we love Him, because we trust Him, because we depend on Him, we rely on Him, and because we've anchored ourselves to Him. Hear me, friends, that is obedience from love. Sometimes it's hard to let go of things, habits that we've had for so long. It doesn't mean we need to keep beating ourselves up over again, but we do need to be walking forward and saying, God, listen, I know you don't want me to do this, and I don't want to do it anymore. But it's this patch that's been on my heart for so long, and I can't get rid of it. It's this temptation, this crutch that's been holding on to me for so long. Listen, God is willing to take the steps forward to see that be removed so that we may have a heart that completely belongs to Him. Understand that is a pure heart, one that is totally His. A pure heart is not one based on our good actions, but one that is based on our ability to surrender and give it all over to Jesus. See, I remember as a kid going over to my grandparents' house, and my grandparents, actually both my grandparents, my grandma especially, she, this is not the one who sews, this is my other grandparents on my other side. She grew very poor, very, 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 very poor. And my grandparents, when they got married, they decided they got married young love, and they met, I believe, when they were in high school or college, and they got married, and they decided that we want to work hard so that our kids would never have to go through that, being so poor. And so when I remember when I was a kid, my grandparents had worked together, had wonderful, successful careers, had a beautiful home. And so as a kid, running around, tracking mud all through the house, my grandma put up a lot of barrier, saying, no, you can't go to this room. You close the door. And if you were to even peek a little bit, you see how it was all perfectly put together with the wall art, and it was just this immaculate carpet and bedding, all these things. And he's like, no, you can't go in there. You can't mess that up. And I get it, right? My brothers and I, we were crazy. I wouldn't let us into those rooms either, okay? We would demolish them. I don't blame my grandma. Right, but she, even for a little bit, had some plastic covering the furniture because we'd bring in our juice cups in and we're like, oh, sorry, Grandma. No. She's like, no, we worked so hard to afford this, so she cared so much for her stuff. And I don't blame her because she worked so hard, but she put up all these barriers, saying, no, don't go in that room. Oh, no, don't go over there. No, don't spill anything on the carpet. Is that water or is that juice? There's only certain spaces that we're allowed to go. Friends, listen. Sometimes with God, there are only spaces we allow Him to go into our lives, and we don't let Him have full roam in our hearts, in every area of our life, our workplace, our home, our bank account, our time, what we value most. We have a hard time letting God into every single room of our life. And so we keep him in one room, or we only let Him give Him access to a couple. We say, God, no, you can't go into that room. You can't go over there because I've got this all packaged the way I want it. No, God, you can't have your fingers on that. That's mine. This is my dream. I've wanted this since I was a kid. This is my dream. You can't have this. Friends, we need to recognize what we are holding back. Because God says, listen, I want you to see me. And I want you to know me. And you've got to let me have free access to all of your heart. Does God have free roam to every part of your life? And really wonder that inside of you. Is there in any way that you would ever say no to God? If He asked you to move, would you say no? If He asked you to quit your job, would you say no? If He asked you to give a couple $100 to someone who is asking you for some money and needs some help, would you say no? What are you holding on to? What can't you let go of that you're not willing to give completely and totally to God? Friends, what I really encourage you to consider, I don't know where you are in your journey with Jesus, but here in a couple of weeks, on July 30th, it's a Tuesday, we're going to have a baptism class. And maybe in your walk right now, you're thinking, I feel like maybe baptism is a thing that I should do. Maybe there's a stirring inside of you. You see, baptism is this beautiful, beautiful symbol that God's given us that represents our love and devotion to Him. Sometimes, especially if we've grown up in church, we were baptized as a kid. But hear me, it doesn't matter if you've never been baptized or have once in your life. If you're in a place where maybe you're reconnecting or need to reaffirm, maybe it's a great decision to be baptized. Because just as a husband and wife have beautiful rings that they put on their hands to symbolize their love for each other, baptism is a beautiful symbol that represents our love for Jesus. How we are completely and totally His. You can sign up for 2 ways to be a part of this class. Maybe you have lots of questions. Maybe you're kind of, you're not really sure. It's okay. Like I said, it's on Tuesday the 30th in a couple of weeks. You can sign up in 2 ways. The tablet kiosk, that's right over here. Just click on the baptism class link. Or you can go to thecornerchurch.com/baptism. You sign up that way. But I encourage you, whether you're a student or an adult, or maybe somebody who has lots of years of life experience. You're not old. You just have lots of years of life experience. Maybe it may be a great step in your walk with Jesus to let Him know that you are completely His. That He has full roam to your heart. To let your church family know that you are all in for Jesus. I encourage you to consider that. One more story that I'd love to share with you before we go. I recently read a book where this well-known pastor here in America, he started a church out in California. It grew to be very, very large. He once had the privilege to venture over to China, where he was invited to share some wisdom and and share some teaching with some of the pastoral, the church leaders there in China. And he flew in, and they brought him into this hotel, and he was kind of shocked as he stood there, as two people at a time would walk into this hotel room. He's used to having business meetings in conference rooms or in auditoriums, but here he's been invited to speak to a group of church leaders, and he's here in a hotel room. Think just like Motel 6 in your mind. And two at a time, people walk into the room, not drawing any attention to themselves, and there's about 30 people in this room. And he shares some things, and he has some great moments with them teaching, and at the very end, he asks, hey, we're wrapping up our time. He's like, I'd love to pray for you. Is there anything I pray for you guys about? And somebody raises their hand so anxiously and says, can you please pray for us? Please, 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 please pray for the church here in China to be just like the church in America. And he paused for a moment. Then he just asked, what would happen if we got found right now? What would happen if the authorities here in the city found out that we were all church leaders gathering right here in this hotel room, and someone just said, you'd get deported back to America? He's like, but what about you? And he just said, we'd all get arrested. And we'd be tortured so that the authorities could have more information to try to find more church leaders. And he was taken back. And then he answered that person's question about praying. He said, no, I will not pray for that. He says, in America, people just don't feel like going to church. They wake up and they're a little tired. They don't go to church even if it's raining outside. But here you are risking your very well-being and your whole life to be in this cramped hotel room because you are all in for Jesus and you want to see the kingdom of heaven unleashed in this world. He says, no, I will not pray for that, but I will pray that the church in America becomes just like you. Friends, are we all in with God? If our faith became illegal in our country, would we really follow Jesus? I once heard someone share in a totally different book that if that were to ever happen in our country, that over 95% of the people who call themselves Christians would completely walk away from God. You realize that within our small church, that would leave just a handful of us who are real and fully devoted to following Jesus. It's hard to have that reality check happen within your heart. I get it. But sometimes the comfort of this world that surrounds us keeps us in this position where we're half in and half out, and we're not all the way in. Friends, are you in? Both feet. Is your heart completely turned over to Jesus? Are you done being consumed with this legalistic way of living, trying to follow these rules? Because God does want to see a transformation happen within our heart. But he wants us to have first a fully devoted heart where we take steps out of love. Not because of fear or self-interest, but out of love. Because we want him. We want to really know the one who dwells in unapproachable light. We want to know the one who is beyond us, who created all of this. We want to know him. We want to be able to call on him. And call him our friend. Will it be incredible? Understand the journey of having a pure heart is a heart that is fully devoted to Jesus, a heart that is fully obedient out of love. Be all in. Yeah. Would you pray with me?